So first of all, welcome as ever, and just a little housekeeping at the beginning. I know those of you who've been before will know all this, but it's just for those of you who haven't. Obviously, this is an informal discussion group, just here to support each other, learn a little bit, and basically moving towards a sense of thrival rather than survival. There's going to be the presentation shortly. Actually, there are more than 4 slides this time. I think there are 5, and it is recorded. And um, it's open to questions and discussions after which won't be recorded, so that you can be fully honest and open. There is no obligation to share or talk if you would rather not. However, I'd be delighted if you would like to. So it's entirely up to you. And the etiquette is that, when you want to say something, if you just raise your hand, because I'll have you all on visual. And to minimize interruptions really when people are speaking. At least that's my aim. I do sometimes interrupt people, but then I have that prerogative because I'm running it. So, but I hope not to be rude. All right. So today's discussion is going to be on the brain and how it kind of controls our physiology and in what ways. And in particular, I want to look at the right brain, left brain division, because we tend to think of the brain as just this homogeneous lump of matter, but in fact we are split down the middle, even in the interior part of the brain, not just the hemispheres that are shown here, but in the interior you have a right and a left, and they have different functions, as you can see from this little diagram. The left brain tends to be our logical, precise, analytical, somewhat repetitive, detail orientated and literal side, and then the right hand side tends to be more creative, imaginative, general, conceptual, and empathetic. And we're going to be talking a little bit about empathy today as well, because it's quite an important concept. And so we tend to think then of the left as our doing part, sometimes also called secondary consciousness. It's the logical, detached part of us, and the right is more primary consciousness. It's more being rather than doing, creative and empathic, as I said. But of course, our culture is very much left brain dominant. We have a culture which does not support creativity, imagination, even our schooling, as you probably all know, particularly if you have children. It's very much about exam results, comparison. It's about rote learning. It's not about finding out who you are on an instinctive level and encouraging that. But the right hand side of your brain isn't just about imagination. It's also about your survival functions, and the sense of balance in your body, physiologically, is called homeostasis. It's sort of keeping things in balance. And so we have this homeostatic survival function. There's the right brain linkage. And so living in a left brain culture means we ignore our kind of body based well being as well, this kind of implicit survival function that should be going on under the surface all the time, keeping us in balance. But when we're very left brain focused, that part kind of doesn't work so well. And so it's no wonder then that we're having so many problems with chronic disease and mental health issues. However, it's not as simple as saying we all need to be right-brained, because right-brained, if we were all just right-brained, we're equally unbalanced. What we really need is an integration of both, of the left and the right and the lower and the upper, because there's deeper parts of your brain as well that need to be integrated. So that's what gives us health, really. The brain, the connections with the brain parts and also the brain and the body give us health. And with our culture being, emphasizing competition, domination, and control, ever since Darwin, sadly, the survival of the fittest has sort of been the rule. that we kind of follow, and you've got to be bigger and better and prettier and more intelligent than everyone else, or richer or something. You've got to be more something. And so we have the inevitable result that our culture is sick, our world is sick, because we are not looking after our world, because we just simply don't feel connected to it. I want to also tell you about the importance of safety. We've kind of touched on that in other sessions, the importance of safety messages. We are both hemispheres, and actually the intuitive needs to be combined with the sort of analytical. And in our development as a human species, we went through various stages where, once that was true, we had during the development of language a sense of the bigger picture of things, the kind of rhythm of things. And there is a theory that music and language are linked in the right hand side. So that kind of the rhythm, the intonation. If you think about it, speech is musical in many ways. It's sound based, it has a rhythm, it has an intonation, it has a tonality. But it appears, latest research shows that music appreciation, if you like, that the conceptualization and production of musical tones came first before speech, which I thought was very interesting, particularly as I love music, and I'm very interested in musical language. And as I've said, speech has a lot of musical comparisons, the intonation, the phrasing. I just had a phrase there because I took a pause, and the prosody, the way I'm saying things. So I'm going up and I'm going down, and I'm putting emphasis on certain things, and I'm encouraging you by the way I'm speaking to feel safe. At least I hope I am. And as we've seen, as modern science has kind of unveiled and discovered what goes on in various parts of the brain, we've seen that speech tends to be in the left hemisphere, something called Broca's area. But interestingly, the musicality of speech is in the right, so that prosody and intonation. And in fact, when we're learning language, it is this integration between those two things that allows understanding. So children, if you don't speak in ways that they can understand, they won't understand the words at first when children are first learning, but they'll understand the tonality of what you're saying. So if you're talking at them like this and you're really angry, they understand already that this is a threat. Whereas if you coo and you say, "Oh, you're beautiful, you're so lovely," there's a musicality to that. And so I think this integration is really important. And the idea of developing imagination and connection with each other, connection with the world that we live in, nature, us being a part of nature. And you can see that that's almost entirely missing in our culture. There's a few people that care, but the majority of people are completely cut off from their imagination and connection with the world they live in. And so one way to bring that back is via connection with other people. And that's obviously what we're doing here, and why I set this up, and why I'm so interested to make it visual. But the way that we pick up messages of safety is primarily through the facial expression of the person you are talking to. And that's why it's really important with children to have them face you. And it's one of the sad things is that we design children's carriages, pushchairs and so on that face away from you. And really, ideally, they need to connect with you. Because we determine safety through the eyes, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And of course, the voice as well, to determine whether we feel safe or not. So safety messages are conveyed through this integration of the sound and musicality, as well as the words. Now, in the last session, I talked about pain, and I talked about the emotions and pain being very, very linked. And I'm not going to repeat what I covered there, but um, I I did record it, so it is on YouTube. I think I did record it. I hope I did. Anyway, this is a repeat of the diagram, but I'm going to take a slightly different take on this one. And you'll see this is a slice through the brain, and we've got areas of the brain in yellow that are pain plus emotion. All right, so the prefrontal cortex here, which is kind of where you analyze what you're feeling and make a judgment about it. This is the somatosensory cortex, so that's where messages from the body come in. The insula, which is largely about empathy. We're going to cover that in a minute. Perceiving what others are thinking or feeling. And then you've got the hippocampus down here, which is kind of memory and emotion, and then the amygdala, which is your smoke alarm. Now, I don't expect you to remember all this, and you don't worry if it's quite complex initially, but the most important part of this is that threat, which is kind of developed from this part, the thalamus, which is where the filtering region of your brain, where it decides what's important, whether you're safe or not, what's going on in your environment, is very, very linked to some of these pain areas as well, and the judgments you're making about the environment you're in. And so it's no wonder that emotions get misinterpreted by the brain in some ways as physical pain. It's not to say the pain isn't real, but the origin is not necessarily damage in the tissue. It's actually a brain construct. Now, some of you may have heard of polyvagal theory. You may not. You may be thinking, what's she on about? Polyvagal theory is quite a recent understanding about the autonomic nervous system, and it says that there is a concept of neurobiological safety, which is the way your vagus nerve, which is part of your autonomic nervous system, transmits information from your body to your brain. And in order to work well, it has to, the upper part of the vagus nerve has to connect with others that feel safe. That's what polyvagal theory is all about, really. And so feeling safe, which is a connected experience in the body, it's nothing to do with your thinking. It's much more to do with a sense, a feeling sense of feeling grounded and safe in your environment. And you're picking up cues all the time, and they're being filtered in these regions of the brain, and kind of there's a dialogue between all these regions. And it's absolutely key to feel bodily safe in order to feel present. In other words, embodied. You're here, you exist, you're okay in your body, and also being creative. So that right brain sensation of having great interactive thoughts that connect with your body feelings, and just generally feeling connected with the life you're living. And so many people go around feeling very dissociated from their bodies and from their lives because they didn't grow up feeling bodily safe. They didn't learn to feel safe. And so those neurological connections don't work very well, and this right left brain connectivity isn't really there. And so, yeah, another way of thinking of neurobiological safety is a sense of okayness. Who we are is loved and safe. And our safety system is based in this sort of brainstem region here. So, and it really links in with the perception of fear and threat. And as I've said, it also handles our pain experience. We filter our experiences, so it's all about perception. It's not about the reality, it's about how we feel about our reality. And we make judgments all the time, but they're largely unconscious, so that we don't think about whether we're safe or not. We just feel safe or we don't feel safe. And so this problem is that emotional pain that you didn't process in the past, or distress, can be misinterpreted by the brain as another threat. And so you get in the pain loop, or the pain cycle, where emotions trigger pain, pain triggers more threat, which triggers more unresolved kind of messages of unsafety. Um, and so things start to go downhill, and you start to shut things down and create these physiological changes to the rest and repair of your body. And so pain can become, very easily can become, chronic. In other words, it lasts for a long, long time, doesn't get better. And so finding safety is really key to helping your brain integrate itself and connect well with the rest of your body. We mustn't forget we're not just brains walking around, with just a brain on a body. The brain and the body connect, of course. One of the main ways they do, and this is a diagram that kind of shows you a link to your adrenal glands, which sit atop your kidneys. And these are your stress response. These are your threat response, if you like, the production of cortisol, one of the main stress hormones, and adrenaline, hence the name. And we tend to think of it as a sort of, we call it an axis in biology. What it means is it's just a linkage between three different parts of your brain and body. It's hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal are linked. And so by feeling and thinking at the same time, so having that left-right brain integration within a sense of safety, we can actually reduce the threat response, and the physiology, how your body works, can start to harmonize. You see, we really need both. We really need all parts of the brain to communicate well. We need a thinking brain as an observer in order to make judgments, and we need a feeling brain in order to know whether we're safe or not. And of course, when you're young, you tend not to have the thinking brain so much. You just have a feeling brain. So up until the age of 7, you are largely feelings. You are sensations and feelings. You're not really a thinking. You can't have context when you're young. You don't understand the context of things. You just know you don't feel good, so you cry, or you feel happy, so you laugh, or you play. And just a reminder how common trauma is. And trauma is a big word. It's a word that people shy away from, because a lot of people think, well, I don't, I didn't have trauma. Some of us know that we did. But just to say that trauma is anything that overwhelms you. So it's really common, and it shuts down these integrated networks, because you're all about survival then. Everything is about survival. So creativity, play, joy, relaxation all go out the window. And another point I wanted to make, which I haven't made for a long time, but it's in my book. I talk about this a lot because it happened to me, is that trauma can be even caused by observing it in others, particularly if they are emotionally close to you. So if it was your mother being attacked, or it was your dog being attacked, or it was someone you loved and cared for who was hurt, you as a sensitive person can also be traumatized, because particularly when safety is not available to you. And so you can be traumatized witnessing something that is painful for another. We call that vicarious trauma. Some people call it borrowed trauma. And all of these experiences are stored in the midbrain, which you've got a diagram here that sort of slice through this middle part of your brain. And especially this part, remember the insula, I talked about it as the site of empathy, which it is, but it's also a part that records the pain of the experiences you went through. All right, so those experiences, if they were painful to you emotionally, are recorded. And believe it or not, they also have a right and a left. I've not shown that here because this diagram just shows it's a sort of slice through both. I've already said that. And so, oops, that's a shame. Excuse me a second. I need to delete that. Thank you. Sorry, it had the wrong slide on. And so empathy, which is located usually in this part of your midbrain, and vicarious trauma are often linked. And so people who've been traumatized often lack. They have too much empathy when they're young, and then they close that down. That part of the brain becomes overwhelmed, and so they then find it difficult to feel. And so empathy is the ability to appreciate and understand the emotions of others. And it's a vital part of development. But as I say, it can get shut down. And a lot of what I'm going to mention here is in a wonderful paper called Vicarious Experience and Disorders of Social Cognition. It's a bit of a long article, and it's a bit scientific. But there's some good nuggets in this one, and I might try and include that in the chat later, so you can maybe have a look at it if you're interested. So empathy is critical to feeling social, to what we call pro-social behavior, and people who lack empathy psychopaths lack empathy. They don't feel anything for the people that they attack. And autistic children find it very difficult to read emotion as well. And it's so critical also to an emotionally rich life to know how other people are feeling so that you can adjust your behavior accordingly. And it's, as I've said, controlled by the insula and also another part with a horribly long name called the ACC. And they integrate together and they sort of talk to each other. And it creates this sense of emotional meaning. And as I've said, there is a right and a left division here as well. So the right-hand side of your insula is all about sharing another's emotional state. And the left insula is about mentalizing the meaning, in other words, the cognitive or thinking aspects of your brain. And the right tends to dominate in highly sensitive people. Highly sensitive people is with capitals because it is a recognized definition that 20% of the population fall into. We are much more sensitive. You would expect maybe that in a range of people that we would be in a nice bell curve, with vast majority of people somewhere in the middle, but it's not the case. There is this 20% of people with extremely high sensitivity, and then the rest of the population, is much less. And they tend to be the ones that get chronic pain. They're the ones that tend to have all sorts of conditions when they're young. They're always going to the doctors because their sensitivity is so high. Their guts get dysregulated, as does their immune system. So tend to be the ones with lots of problems. However, the positive is we are highly creative, often very musical, often creative in artistic ways, and if we are supported, we have a very emotionally rich life. So the problem can be, though, that we over empathize, as I've mentioned before, and instead of having a division between the other person and you actually feel their pain as if it's yours. So we become the other, which is clearly an issue. And now I want to finish. My last slide is how to deal with this. And overcoming trauma is all about interpersonal connection. I've got Julia Roberts here, just an example of somebody who kind of looks kindly. Feeling safe with another is really important because it's the way you learn how to feel safe in yourself. And eye gaze is such a big part of that, and their body language, how they're looking towards you. Because it is a somatic or embodied experience, not a cognitive one. You don't think about feeling safe. Your body simply picks up the cue, and with connections to your back brain, it reacts accordingly. So you would either move away or you would move towards. And to establish safety, our presence with each other has to be grounded and safe feeling. It's a learned experience, right? So if your parents didn't feel safe themselves, or your caregivers, they can't give you what they did not have. They can't teach you to feel safe if they don't. And this is one of the major reasons why trauma links down the generations. Now, I'm sorry about these photos. I'm just going to show you a difference in eye gaze. The one on the right is just a stock photo of, someone looking a bit threatening. This one, he's actually a criminal, and I want you to look at the deadness of his eyes. This is a man who does not connect empathetically. And the more shame you feel, shame is an embodied experience, the less connection you're able to feel. And so you shut down your empathy and you become quite dead or dissociated from your experience. I said it was the last one, and it isn't quite. There's just one final thing I wanted to tell you, which is how to harmonize your brain. So I think I will end on a positive, something that you can follow up. Shame is a learned experience of non-connection, right? You don't feel loved, supported, or safe, and you learn that that's your fault. It teaches you that you are not enough. And because it's a natural part of human development, it occurs in everyone, but normally it's a stage you go through and then you come out the other side. But in some families, shame is used as a strategy to limit your behavior. So it says, who do you think you are? Don't be ridiculous. And thus it teaches you that you can't be authentic in your expression. And so overcoming shame can be something we have to do as adults via connection, emotional expression, and experiencing your mind body in harmony with itself. In other words, removing the conflict between who you've had to be and who you are now. Who you really are, I should say. Who you really are is often your authentic expression, but it had to be covered up or limited in order to fit your family of origin and be what they wanted or could tolerate. But the good news is you can overcome these not just through language, through talking, through sharing. You can also do it via sensory stimulation, and in particular sound, light, and touch. And I think I'm going to show you something. I'm going to actually try and share one of the online harmonizing audios, which sometimes I give out to people. There's one I send out to people often, which is called Sacred Acoustics, but I've just discovered a whole YouTube channel called The Power of You, which has some wonderful binaural beats. Binaural means you have to listen in headphones because there are two different frequencies in each ear, and it helps to harmonize the left and the right hand side of your brain, and the upper and the lower, and your body and your brain. So it's a really good example of something you can do at home, which is it's free. It's completely free, and it does work, as you'll see from a lot of the comments on the site. Another way, of course, you can do it is through heart rate variability and breath work. Heart rate variability is another subject on its own, so I'm not going to go into that today, but just changing your breathing can often harmonize your body a lot better. Now, I'm pretty sure if I come out of this that I have on another link I'm just going to play this very quickly to you, so if you're listening, hopefully. This is a binaural audio, and it's wonderful through headphones. You really have to listen through headphones. And also it's got some sacred geometry going on here in the middle, which is very mesmeric because it's part of the mathematics of the universe, and our body responds to that even though our mind doesn't understand it. I think this is from The Power of You, yeah. So I'm going to try and copy that for you. I'll stop there. I'm going to copy that for you here so that we've got it in the chat. And some questions I want you to answer. Can you see how the left and right brain might be unbalanced in your life? And have you had any vicarious or observed trauma experiences? And that's a tricky question. You don't have to answer that one. But if you'd like to share that, and how can you increase your sense of neurobiological safety or harmony in your life?